Today, I'm speaking with a man who has likely already talked to and interviewed your favorite fighter. Not only has he had a successful start to his career in boxing journalism, he also is a power player in the music industry for years. I'm happy to introduce the host of Cigar Talk, Naji Grampus. Naji, how you doing today?
Man, I'm really good, Luke. Thank you for having me.
I appreciate you coming on. I know you had a birthday last week. Happy belated birthday. You do anything cool to celebrate?
Thank you, bro. Yeah, I went to Aruba. I was in
Uh,
Aruba for a couple of days and got some sunshine, got out the cold. So man, it was a good time, man.
Absolutely, that sounds awesome. First, before we get into boxing, I mentioned in the intro you're in the music industry. I mean, you go to Cigar Talk and you have heavy hitter interviews with 50 Cent, Pooh Shiesty, Young Dolph. Can you talk about what you do in the music industry a little bit? It seems really cool.
Yeah, no problem. I'm actually in my office right now. You can see a couple of plaques behind me. I'm in my office. So I am the VP of Urban Strategy here at Sony Orchard. Sony Orchard is one of the divisions in Sony. It's Sony's independent distribution, and I oversee all of our hip hop and R&B priorities. So from signing artists, I sign artists here to distribution deals. I sit over a bunch of teams, like from marketing teams and sales teams, and there are a bunch of other teams that kind of make this whole engine move. And I sit across those teams and coordinate strategy when it comes to everything that's black music, hip hop, R&B, Afro beats, things like that.
That's awesome. So, how far in advance, like, are you already working on 2025 for artists, or like how far in advance are you already thinking for the our artist on Sony?
Yeah, man, I'm definitely I have a plan. I plan 3 months in advance. Like generally, everything I do, any release that I have, for the most part, is planned 3 months in advance. But the nature of like hip hop, it's sort of last minute. Guys is always changing things and dropping stuff last minute. So you kind of have to be able to do both, right? Like be able to plan ahead just so that you have enough time to make sure all the coordination and all the plans are like taking effect. But also you got to be nimble enough that like when things change, just to make sure like we're implementing whatever those changes are.
All right, last music question. What was your Spotify rap looking like this year?
Ah man, good question. I had number one on my Spotify rap was Gunna. There was a song called 101.
Okay.
Um, I had that. That was number one. There's a new artist by the name of Bossman D-Lo, rapper out of Florida. I had a couple of his songs in my top five as well. And I think the last one was Bryson Tiller, What She Want. That was my girl listening to that a lot on my page, but you know what I'm saying. But yeah, that's a lot of just street rap. I guess was on my Spotify top five.
That's what's I think Boss Man drops an album tonight. If
Yeah, he does. Yeah, he
yeah,
got out. Man, I'm definitely
I
going to
like
tune in.
I like Bossman and Gunna a little, and Bryson Tiller, that for sure. Quickly, I mean not quickly. Now switching over from boxing. So how'd you get into boxing? Obviously, music is your main career, but I mean, a lot of fans they would think boxing is your main career. Just everything you've been doing. How'd you get into boxing?
Um, Man, I always been a fan of boxing, man, since I was probably about like 12, 13 years old. My early inception just to watching boxing. I remember my dad at the time uh he played me a Muhammad Ali versus George Foreman fight, and he was like, "Yo, you got to watch this." And just seeing Muhammad Ali talking shit and beating this big guy who's like wailing on him. He's doing the rope a dope. Like everything about it was just so cool to me. It felt poetic, man. It didn't feel like just a fight. It felt like, man, this guy's, he's overcoming adversity and telling a story. So I guess that was my inception of really falling in love with the sport. It kind of just transitioned to just being a real fan, man. I watched guys like Roy Jones, obviously the great Floyd Mayweather, watching their careers from start to finish. Um, those were things that really got me into it. But as far as the working capacity, um, I initially tried to start working in boxing. So at the time, like I said, I'm music adjacent. There was Rock Nation Sports, and I knew some of the guys from Rock Nation. I met this guy. His name is OG Juan Perez, one of Jay Z's best friends. He's the president of Rock Nation Sports. So at the time, they had just started their boxing division, and they were looking to sign, a bunch of fighters. And I had met Juan not too long before they started it, And I used to come to tell Juan every day, like he kind of let me intern for him. So I used to see him and come to his office and be like, yo, I'm telling you, I know who the hottest boxers are, man. Like, let me get a job. I used to just try to work for Rock Nation. Let me get a job here. Let me get a job. And one day he was like, look, if you want a job, you know, you got to go find me somebody I could sign and bring them to me. And if we like them and they become something, I'll give you a job. So I took that seriously, man. Like I was going to every amateur tournament around. Like I'm driving
Hmm.
my car. I drove to Philly. I drove to Virginia. I drove to Florida. Like I was just driving around because at the time, I didn't really have a lot of money at the time. So I'm just like driving everywhere, just going to these tournaments. And a couple of guys that I discovered that I felt like had a real future in the sport was Shakur Stevenson, Boots Ennis, and Richardson Hitchens. Those were the three guys I really zoomed in on that I felt like, had a chance to really be champions. And then I told them, and they didn't believe me, man. It was a lot of politics. I think I was also just this young kid that nobody paid attention to. Um, just talking my shit, like, yo, I'm telling y'all, I know I know this sport. And I guess they just never took me seriously enough to do anything. So I never got signed. But in the process of that, they let me go to the Rock Nation like fights, right? So
Hmm.
Andre Ward was their first big signing. I think they signed Miguel Cotto after that. They did a couple of splash signings, and I was able to go to the fights. And in that process, I started to kind of meet people. I met a woman named Kelly Swanson who um, is one of the big PRs that work with the PBC. And she was one of the people early on that took a liking to me and, allowed me access. You know what I mean? So I
Hmm.
think that was my first introduction to being around the boxing world, actually going to fights and getting a credential and like just meeting everybody who, who's who in boxing.
Why I mean the names you just threw out, Boot, Shakur, Richardson, Hitchin. I mean you're batting 100% right. They're all world champions now. Like is that something that you kind of like flex your like if you see someone at Rock Nation, you like I told you, like I told you so.
Oh man, I saw one of those guys a couple years ago, maybe like 2, 3 years ago, and I was like, "Look, what I tell you, man? Yeah, I definitely talk my shit to them when I see them, because like I said, I think I have a knack. That's one of the things I do just right in music, right? I find artists that I think have potential to be stars, and I think I've been blessed with an ability that I can see what a star looks like, not just music, right? I think I can see that in boxing as well. So I can't say I'm 100% because I had another guy named Amir Imam I was looking at that he was doing really good, but he never panned out. So I wouldn't say 100%, but I have a pretty good track record of picking, the guys that are going to be something.
Is there a quality that sticks out to you most about us who could be a star, or just who's someone who has potential but maybe not the star quality?
Yeah, I mean, I really look for both. You know what I mean? I think the thing I like to say about stars today is like you can do things to aid star power, but you can't create it, right? Like we're in a
Mhm.
generation today where social media is everything and the people pick, right? Like
Yeah.
you can't make a star, the people have to pick you and choose you as their star, right? Like so the stars that we see now, guys like Javante Davis or Canelo Alvarez, you know what I'm saying? Anthony Joshua to a degree as well.
Hmm.
You know, these are people that, you do as much as you can to market them, but the people ultimately choose like this is our guy and this is the one we want to champion. So just what I look for, man, is obviously outside of the boxing intangibles, like being a real good boxer, but it's just work ethic, man, right? Like how hard are you willing to work on your craft? How much do you actually want this? And then it's relatability, right? Like how do people relate to your story, your boxing style, like the things outside of the ring, like do people relate to that? Can people see you and be like, you know what, this guy represents me? So those are a couple of things that I really look at when I'm trying to judge what a star could be.
Incredible. Now going to your interviews, obviously you've interviewed, it feels like everybody in the sport. But for you, what do you think has been your best interview, and what is the interview you're most proud of?
That's a good question. I think maybe my best interview was, damn, that's hard to say. I mean, maybe I would have to say maybe my best was like the Javante interview. I did two Javante
Mhm.
Davis interviews. The second one, which was this summer in July, I believe, But I would say that's one. I think that's one of the best, man. I think that because one is Javante's not a guy that talks to media often. So
Hmm.
one is just getting him is hard to do. But also, I think even when he does talk to media, he's not really always the most welcoming guy or friendly or talkative. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And I think in that interview specifically, I was able to get him to open up in a way that I haven't seen him do in other interviews, right? Like we talked about his time in prison, right? Like he spent time in prison this summer, for a case that he had. And, we talked about his time in prison and his journey to becoming, Muslim, his journey to Islam and things like that. So just really getting in deep. And I feel like he kind of let me in a little bit in a way that I haven't seen before. So I would say that's one of my best. And then what was the other one? Was it favorite or what was the other one?
One you're most proud of. Like
Oh, one
maybe
most
it's like you had a crazy story to getting the interview, or just like you walk down and you're like, okay,
proud.
yeah, I just did this.
Yeah, man, I've had some big ones now, man. Like the Canelo, I'm definitely proud of that. Um, I would say there was a crazy story when I had the first time I interviewed Adrian Broner. Um, I flew to Colorado. He was training in Colorado, um, and I flew out there. And his trainer at the time, who he passed away, rest in peace, Coach
Hmm.
Mike Stafford. Um, Mike Stafford showed me a lot of love, so I flew out there. And the guys from PBC, they like my interviews as well. So salute to the PBC. Like, they were like, yo, they set up the time and place, and they set us up at a gym. I was there waiting at the gym, and Broner never shows up. So I'm waiting there probably like an hour, and I'm just like, yo, what the fuck is going on? So I get the coach's number. I call the coach. I'm like, yo, Coach Mike, what's up, man? Like, I'm here to do this Broner interview. He's not here. Like, what's going on? And he's like, yo, man, I'm sorry, but Broner doesn't want to do the interview. And I was like, what? I flew all the way out here from New York. What you mean he don't want to do it? Why? And he said something like, I guess I don't know. Broner had an issue with Showtime. He's like, yo, you're a guy from Showtime. I'm like, man, I'm not Showtime. This is my own series. And Broner didn't want to do it. So anyway, I called one of my guys from the PBC. Um, and he's like, all right, man, you know what? Let me make a phone call for you. I'm going to call the big boss. I said, oh, the big boss, that's Al Heyman. You know what I
Yep.
mean? So I'm going to call the big boss. And then I said, all right. So I'm waiting there. And next thing I know, I get a call from Coach Mike again, maybe 10, 15 minutes later. He's like, Al Heyman just called Adrian Broner. He said, meet him at the hotel right now. He's going to do it. So I'm like, yeah, the fact that Al Heyman, you know what I'm saying, called on my behalf, and I don't know what he said. I have no idea. You know what I mean? I didn't ask. I
Yeah,
just,
that's
I was just like, man, that's like a cool moment that Al did that on my behalf. So that was a cool story, and I was definitely happy about that.
no, that's incredible. Yeah, I mean, Al Heyman, he's for some people a lot of like mysterious figure behind boxing, but for him to speak on your behalf and for Adrian Broner to listen just kind of shows the respect he has.
That's for sure. Sure.
Um, when you're going to interview a fighter, do you have a process that these are the questions I want to ask, or is it kind of, hey, I want to ask about current events, just keep things light? What's your process and when you're going into interviewing a fighter?
Well, I always do a lot of research, man. I'm a
Mhm.
research based interviewer, right? Like I think that's a part of who I am and what I want to present to the boxing world is just like I thoroughly research these questions. I think just as far as my lining of questioning, it's important for me to talk about the reason that we're here, and I don't. That's one of the things I guess I don't like about other media. I'm not calling out no names, but other media that I've seen like when you're at a press conference and you're here, let's just use Canelo as an example. Canelo's fighting whoever, and you're at the press conference asking them about David Benavidez. It's like, I get it, right? Like we all want the salacious clips and those are the fights, but I always try to start my interviews with the reason that we're here, right? And 9 times out of 10, when a interview is happening, it's because the boxer's promoting something. So it's like, I talk about what's the reason for the promotion. And then I kind of start to get into the other stuff. You know what I mean? So I may do some current events and sprinkle some current events in there. But I think most often I try to just get into their story, right? So like we can understand who they are and, build a connection with them outside of the ring. I kind of feel like those are the things that, help fans really connect to their people is when you feel like they're like you relate to them. I think
Mhm.
everyone, the principle of homophily says that, we're drawn to people that are like ourselves, right? So I think if you can, hear a story and feel like, oh man, like this sounds like my story, or I went
Mhm.
through that, you know what I mean? It kind of just gives you a different point of view on them, and maybe some inspiration and to things that you're going through as well.
Definitely. When you're asking these questions, how do you navigate? Because to a degree, there's some boxers that are a little bit sensitive. If you ask a boxer, hey, if someone's not in a fight, you ask them, hey, a potential fight with this fighter, you might get that other fighter saying, hey, why'd you bring my name up? How do you navigate that and just keeping relationships with boxers?
Yeah, man, it's definitely a tough thing to navigate, bro, to be honest, because I think on one hand you're media, so you try to be objective and maintain all sides of the coin,
Hmm.
right? But on the other hand, you build relationships with these
Yep.
folks, and sometimes they expect certain things of you that at times may be fair and at times they aren't, so
Hmm.
it's definitely a hard line to balance. For me personally, what I just try to do is be authentic to myself, man. You know what I'm saying? And what I say is, when I say that, I mean like just giving my true and authentic opinion about what I think and feel, right? Not
Hmm.
led or driven by like clout chasing or just trying to make a moment or trying to go
Hmm.
viral. Like I try to be as honest about what it is that I feel and what it is that I see from a boxer or a fight. But I think then the other thing is, I try to just make sure that the fighters and the people understand, like, yo, man, like, this is my job, bro. Like, I'm doing my job. Like, we're cool, and I think there's a line. Like, I think there's a way to say certain things that without disrespecting somebody, right? Like, I think you can get critique across without it being disrespectful, and that's what I try to do. But again, I think that comes with the territory. So there's always going to be people that get mad,
Hmm.
that it's just there's not really much you could do. It just comes with it.
Definitely. What are a few interviews you still have on your hit list? So 2025, you're looking to, hey, I want to interview this guy either maybe for a second time or a third time or for the first time.
Yo, man, I got a couple, man. Even though I've interviewed a lot of guys, man, I've been able to check off a lot of names on my
Mhm.
boxing wish list, but there's still so much more to do, man. So one, I really want to interview Turkey Al Sheik, man. Big Turkey. That's what I call him. Big Turkey. I just think what he's doing is so interesting in the sport. I just have a lot of questions as to what it is that he's doing. What's the end goal? Like, how he's doing. There's just so many things that I want to ask him because he's come in and he's made a real impact in the sport, whether you like him or not. You know what I mean?
Right.
So he's definitely impacting the game. So 2025, I want to talk to Turkey Al Sheik. I also want to talk to Jake Paul. Same kind of deal. I think Jake is doing things that are unprecedented right now in the sport, and I want to get a different POV than any of the other interviews I've heard from him. And then I guess the final one, Floyd Mayweather, man. That's like my everybody talk about Ali. Like Floyd Mayweather was my Ali. Like that was the guy that I really looked up to and was like my favorite fighter. So yeah, hopefully those three in 2025 are things that I'm shooting for.
Yeah, those would be three incredible interviews. And this leads perfectly into my next question because I want to talk about just some boxing news, boxing topics going on. But Gael Sheik, obviously, the February 22nd card got announced just a little bit. One, what do you think about the card? And then you kind of answered this already, but what have you thought so far about Turkey's inclusion into boxing, what he's bringing, and what do you want to see maybe that to change, or what do you like so far for the future?
Yeah, man. Man, that's a banger. That card is a banger. It's so much. It's so many great fights on there. Obviously, the rematch. We
Hmm.
love to see that. Bivol better Biev. I had Bivol winning the first one, so my boy got to
Okay.
get his lick back. I want Bivol to come get his lick back. You know what I'm saying?
And then a
So
trilogy sets up a
yeah,
trilogy
exactly,
right there. Yep.
exactly. So I really enjoyed that. Then we have Daniel Dubois, right? He's fighting
Yep.
Joseph Parker on there. That's a good fight, man. Dubois' last showing against AJ, of course, was a spectacular one. Stand out, KO'd. Joseph Parker's been on the tear too, right? Beat
Hmm.
Deontay Wilder. You know what I'm saying? So I actually might have Joseph Parker for the upset in that one. To be honest, that's an interesting fight. Of course, Shakur Stevenson versus
Yep.
Kid Austin. I like that fight as well. It got some critique, but I like that Shakur is giving the young hungry lion a chance. You know what I mean? I think
Hmm.
boxing needs more of that, where the young hungry guys that are ranked and what I'm saying, making some noise, get a chance at the champion. So I like that. Madrimov is supposed to fight Virgil, I think, on there. What is it? What else? I'm missing a couple of more, but man, there's so many bangers. Oh, Shiraz and Carlos Adames. I
Yep.
like that fight too. I think Shiraz gonna upset him also. But man, it's so many good fights on that card that are like 50-50. Big Bang Zhang versus what's the new dude name? I forget the guy's name that Zhang is fighting, but Kabayel.
Yeah.
So we got that fight, man. It's 50-50s all over, man. I love what Turkey's doing. I think my only things that I want to see from Turkey, I would say, are one is the inclusion of women in
Yeah.
in these fights, right? Like I think the women's boxing game is growing. We just saw, a great fight on the Jake Paul card. The rematch with Amanda Serrano and Katie Taylor. I thought
Hmm.
Amanda Serrano won that, but
Same.
I think the women's boxing being included in these Riyadh season cards as well is something that I feel like makes the sport bigger. It's inclusive, and that's something I would like to see. Moving forward, just as far as Riyadh is concerned.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I mean, the proof is in the pudding with the Serrano versus Taylor rematch. I mean, just the eyes and basically everyone I talked to about that fight, they were like, "Oh, Paul versus Tyson, it went whatever." But did you see the women's fight? And if you get those women's fight on these cards, I think yeah, it could take it to a whole nother level.
That's what I'm saying. I would love to see, Clarissa Shields on one of those cards, and you know what I mean. I
Hmm.
think the women's game is growing, and there's a lot to see and support there. So I would definitely like to see Turkey add that into everything he's doing.
Definitely. PBC looks like they'll have a strong start to the year with Benavidez versus Morrell, which is great fight, and then Tank Davis versus Lamont Roach. Talk to me about those two fights and what you're looking for in those.
Man, Benavidez versus Burrell. I'm so hyped for that fight. Like, I think, this is like, the casuals, I don't think understand the magnitude of it, but the real
Hmm.
boxing fans know, like, this is, at 168, which was one fight ago for both guys, they were number two and number three in the division to me. You know what I'm saying?
Hmm.
I'm not sure about rankings. I know Benavidez, obviously Canelo was the, Mr. Undisputed,
Hmm.
but, between Benavidez and David Morrell, man, I think this is a great fight. I think, again, this is another example of a guy that's, I can't say champion because David's not the full champion yet. I don't believe he's the full champion yet at 75, but the guy that's championship level, giving the young
Hmm.
guy, the young hungry lion, a shot. Like Morrell's no joke, man. I know in his last fight against Hot Rod, he didn't look too, as dominant as he usually does. But Morrell's a great talent, man. Footwork,
Hmm.
speed, power, all of that, and obviously the Mexican monster, man. He gonna break your will, man. Punches and bunches, speed, counters. His defense is actually a lot better than people give it credit for. So I think this is an amazing fight. I saw the WBC mandated it to whoever wins this is the
Hmm.
mandatory for the better BF Bivol winner. So man, I'm super excited for that. I think this is going to be a banger and definitely a candidate for 2025 Fight of the Year. The way I see it, in my opinion, I lean towards Benavides. I lean towards Benavides for experience. I think he's just more experienced. He's the more experienced guy, and I can see the pressure having an effect on Morrell late. But it ain't no easy fight, man, and it could go either way, to be honest. So I love that. And Tank versus Lamont Roach. That fight was heavily criticized, man. A lot of people were mad at that.
Hmm.
You know what I'm saying? I mean, I guess I get it. I get it. That wasn't a fight that fans were calling for, so I could get it from that standpoint.
Hmm.
Um, but I don't think the fight is like a bad fight. I don't think the fight is as lopsided as everyone
Yep.
is making it. Lamont Roach, who's a champion, he's a world champion at 130. I think people are criticizing it because he's at 130, he's moving up. But when I look at the weigh-in, I was at the weigh-in and the press conference in New York.
Hmm.
Lamont Roach looked like the bigger guy to
Yeah.
me. To be honest, he's a little taller. He looked a little wider. It didn't look like, if we're talking about this guy's the smaller guy, it doesn't look like that to me. You know
Hmm.
what I mean? I think Lamont Roach has a pretty good skill set. I don't say pretty good. He has a good skill set. In terms of boxing
Mhm.
IQ, his counter punching. You know what I'm saying? His distance is pretty good. And we saw Frank Martin had some success against Tank in the beginning rounds, right? Like before Tank started to turn it up and
Mhm.
KO, he had some success. So it makes me feel like, Lamont, to me, I think he's more of a tactician than Frank Martin. So it's just like, is he going to be able to frustrate Tank and have some success? So I definitely think it's a better fight than people are giving it credit for. Is it the fight that everyone wanted to see? No. But I think it's a good fight nonetheless. And I also think, um, 135 is becoming more scarce of a division. It's not what it was circa 2, 3 years
Mhm.
ago. And Tank tried to negotiate with Loma, and he said no. So I'm not mad at the fight. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with Benavidez Morel. I think that'll be, like you mentioned, one of the top fights in 2025. Just call out banger, heavy hitters. I think that's going to be great. And then winner gets Bivol, better be of that. I mean, it's great. And that's one thing Turkey's done. He's kind of elevated 75 to be getting better be of and Bivol into the ring. And then,
Yeah,
okay, Benavidez and Morel go up. So that's been good. And then I agree. I mean, it was just lack of options. It fell for Tank Davis at the moment. And I think if it's not Shakur Stevenson, then people are going to have a problem with whoever Tank faces from now on,
yeah.
which to a degree is unfair. But I think eventually those two will get in. Last quick question about boxing news. Looks like Earl Spence Fundora been rumored forever. Fundora said something yesterday saying that's next. Spence put something on IG today. So big fish soon come or something like that. How do you see that fight if Spence comes back against Fundora?
Man, that is a tough fight to call. You know what I'm saying? Because listen, and I'm an Errol Spence fan. I am a
Hmm.
fan of Errol Spence. I've liked him, for a long time. At least 10 years now, I've been watching Errol Spence. So
Hmm.
it's just hard to say because we don't know where he's at.
Yeah.
We don't know as fans. Our last showing of Errol Spence obviously was the big Terrence Crawford fight, which is a year and a half ago.
Mhm.
He lost. He got dominated, right? Like it wasn't just a loss. He got dominated. Um, and we don't know, right? Was that a style matchup thing? Was Bud just better on the night? Was Errol going through some things? Obviously, we know he had the car crash. We saw the I think two car crashes maybe, but he had a big car crash that people are like, yo, maybe this affected him. His
Mhm.
mobility, just those type of impact injuries could have a real effect on you because that was a real bad car accident. Um, so it's just really hard to say what'll happen based on we don't know where Errol Spence is. If he's the old Errol Spence, I mean, I think he should be able to compete at a high level and beat him. But again, is we just don't know where he is, and that's what makes
Yeah.
this such a great fight. Is it's not a tune-up, right? Like
Mm-mm.
Fundora, especially in his last fight against Tim Tszyu, we saw him. To me, that was the best he's ever looked. Fundora to me has obviously he's a tall guy. I think he's about what 6'5", 6'4", something like
Yep.
that. And he generally fights small. You know what I mean? He fights on the inside a lot. He doesn't use his reach a lot. But against Tim Tszyu, that was the first time I really saw him establish his long range jab, using his distance, great counter shots, not really playing the middle. He showed a different dynamic to me and a different variation to his game that I haven't seen before. So man, I think it's a tough fight for Errol. You know what I mean? It just kind of depends where he is gonna
Hmm.
let me know, how this fight goes. So I could probably see from round 2 or 3, I'll be able to tell what the outcome is gonna be. But I think it's an interesting fight, and I think there's questions to be asked of both sides, right? Like, is Errol still Errol?
Hmm.
And is Fundora got enough in him to beat a guy that's a Hall of Famer, a future Hall of Famer?
Definitely. I'm from Texas, so Spence is my favorite fighter ever. And
Oh
like
yeah,
I'm I'm rocking with him 100%. But like you said, there's questions. Like we don't even know who his trainer is.
right.
We don't know that. It's just, and I mean, I was at the Crawford fight. That was demoralizing. And you just wonder how much more does he have? He's talked about cryptic tweets about retirement. So does he already have that on his mind? So of course you want to see Spence return to the old Spence, but you just don't know at this point.
Yeah, I agree, man. And I think that's what kind of makes this exciting is like we just want to see does he still have it, right? Like there's
Hmm.
there's always that do you still got it kind of thing
Yeah.
that everybody wants to know. So I mean, we're gonna get those questions answered next year for sure. I'm excited.
Well, last question here. Three fights, 2025. What do you want to see?
I wanted to say the three fights. I mean, man, Canelo Benavidez, man, one that's probably the biggest fight in boxing. You know, it's one that everybody wants to see. We just want to see Canelo, you know, challenge himself at that upper echelon level, like, you know, one more time, like he's done
Hmm.
so many times in the past. That's the thing about, you know, boxing is like fans don't give you a pass because of what you did before. You know, if you're here and you're still active, they're gonna want to see you fight the best. You know what I mean? So that's a fight that's highly anticipated that I want. Obviously, Tank versus Shakur Stevenson. Another big fight, another one that's a 50-50 in my eyes. Not sure how it's going to go. I could see a pathway for both guys to win. I think they're both, you know, special fighters in their own right. Like Tank, he's got obviously, you know, devastating power. But it's not just the power with Tank, because if you notice, a lot of his knockouts, there's setups. They're not just like raw power, like, you know, Better Biev. Well, Better Biev just comes through the front door with raw power. Tank a lot of times will surprise you through the back door, right? Like he'll counter you, and you know he'll set you up for different. He'll set different traps to
Hmm.
throw that counter uppercut shot, or you know maybe come with that left hook. So Tank is special in that, right? And then Shakur, you know, he has the best defense in the game. A guy that has great eyes, a guy that can move his feet. You know, he's just hard to hit, right? So it's like literally the best defense versus the best offense, and who wins? Um, so I would love to see that fight, man. I think that's the other 50-50. And then I guess the last fight that I would want to see, man, I gotta go with it's probably not gonna happen in 2025. It'll probably take another year to mature, but just my wish list, I want to see Inoue versus Jesse Bam Rodriguez. I think, man, you know, those two guys, those are the little guys in the sport, but man, they both are cracking. They both throw really hard shots, incredible skill level, incredible IQ from both. I was at the last fight. You know, I saw you out there. I was
Hmm.
at the fight with Bam, and oh my God, his footwork is just so good, man. And the way he's able to cut off the ring and pressure you, use his counters, pressure shots, and of course the monster in a way, the Japanese monster, like he's so precise with his shots, like the precision, laser strikes. You know what I'm saying? Big left hands. Um, man, that's the fight that I want to see, man. Bam versus the monster. So I feel like that'll happen eventually. I don't think 2025, but shit, if I had it my way, that's what I want to see.
Now that, I mean, the first two, obviously, that's everybody. I feel like those are the mandatory two answers right now. But that last one, in a way, versus Bam. I mean, half the reason, probably more than half the reason I went to Philly because I wanted to see Bam live. I'd seen Boots in the summer against Evanesian, and I was like, I want to see Bam in person. And he delivers. I'm excited to see where Bam goes, and I love to see Bam is talking about the in a way fight. Like it'll happen in the future. He's not shying away to talk, saying, "Oh, different weight classes." He's like, "It's going to happen." Granted, maybe not this year, but it's going to happen, and that's a crazy fight.
That's right, man. I can't wait for that one. It's gonna happen. Bam told me that in our interview too. He said, "Oh, it's gonna happen." So I believe him.
Najee, I appreciate you taking the time here. Thank you so much. I hope you have a great holiday season, and a great 2025. Looking forward to Cigar Talk.
Yo, Luke, thank you, man. I appreciate you as well, man. Keep doing what you're doing. I checked out your channel, man, and you're doing some good work, man. Stay consistent and keep going, brother. You got my support.
Thank you so much, Najee. Look forward to seeing you at fights in the future.
All right, bro. Take care. Have a good one.
You too. Bye.